I am in Corydon, Indiana at the Corydon Capitol State Historic Site. This is the first state capitol building of the state of Indiana. Of course, it's since moved to Indianapolis, but this is where the state began. So we're gonna go inside and check this place out. For a little bit of context and understanding how the small town of Corydon became the first state capital, it's important to remember that in 1800, all of present-day Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and much of northern Minnesota was all governed under the Indiana Territory, at the capital in Vincennes, Indiana. In 1813, the territorial legislature voted to move the capital. The main reason was actually to remove Governor William Henry Harrison from his political base in Vincennes, and also because Corydon is in central southern Indiana, as the territory was shrinking at this point. Several towns were considered, but Corydon's representative Dennis Pennington was able to secure Corydon, and the plan was that they would meet at the old Harrison County Courthouse, which was not this building. At the same time, they started making plans for this building, made of Indiana limestone, and started meeting here for the first state legislature when it was nearly completed in 1816. President James Madison signed the Enabling Act, allowing for the election of delegates within the territory to meet at Corydon to consider statehood. So 43 delegates met here for 19 days in June of 1816 to draft the first Indiana Constitution. The convention did not take place in this room. After statehood, this became the House of Representatives chamber, and the building was not yet ready. They also didn't really meet in the old building either because it was way too hot in June, so they mostly met under a large elm tree nearby, now called the Constitution Elm, and this is a chunk of the old tree. On June 29, 1816, the delegates signed the Constitution and it went into effect. President Madison signed the resolution admitting Indiana as the 19th state of the Union on December 11, 1816, so that's when they really started using this new building, and it served as the capital from 1816 to 1825. Article 11, Section 11 declared Corydon as the capital city until 1825. Then they would have to choose to remain or to move, and when 1825 came about, the legislature did almost immediately move in January of that year to move to Indianapolis. Corydon is in the very southern part of the state. People were expanding northward. There was a housing problem here because they weren't really prepared to become a capital city, so that's why it really made sense to move to Indianapolis. This was the Senate chamber. Under the 1816 Constitution, senators had only 3-year terms, and it didn't fix the specific number of senators. It just had to be no less than 1/3 of the number of representatives, but not more than 1/2 that number. The bookshelves are original to the building. This was the original Indiana Supreme Court chamber. Until the 1851 Constitution, there were 3 judges appointed by the governor with consent of the Senate, and they had 7-year terms. Isaac Blackford was the longest-serving Chief Justice, originally appointed by Governor Jennings, and his detailed reports on all of the cases during his tenure have become a basis for court reports across the world. So this is a marker about a Supreme Court case that took place here. So Polly Strong was born into slavery in 1796 in the Northwest Territories, so specifically Vincennes, and she was owned by innkeeper Hyacinth LaSalle. Now Article 5 in the Indiana Constitution specifically prohibited slavery ever. Strong sued for her freedom in Knox County. That court ruled that she would remain enslaved, but the case was brought here in 1820. They ruled that slavery can have no existence in Indiana, and the decision did not free all remaining slaves. I know there were even slaves in Indiana in the 1840 census. This federal brick home is also part of the state historic site. It was the second Governor William Hendrix's home and headquarters. The house was built in 1817 right by the state capitol. William Hendrix was originally from western Pennsylvania, as were a lot of settlers around here, and he began to make a name for himself. He was an unofficial delegate at the convention, and he politically aligned himself with Jonathan Jennings and Dennis Pennington, and after the Constitutional Convention, he defeated the former territorial governor Thomas Posey for a seat in the House of Representatives in D.C., Then in 1822, he ran unopposed for governor, succeeding Jonathan Jennings, who then took his congressional seat. The second governor of Indiana won 100% of the vote, and while governor, he lived here at this home, which he purchased from Davis Floyd. This is one of the only surviving desks from the Corydon Capitol building. All the ones you saw in there were replicas. They have some amazing stuff belonging to the first governor, Jonathan Jennings, including his glasses and case. And this was actually his desk. It is believed to be the one used at the Constitutional Convention, and they would have had it under the Constitution elm. Then he used this as the first governor. That's pretty awesome. Hendrix immediately had to deal with a lot of economic turmoil because of the Panic of 1819. All of the banks failed in the state, and he ended up having to sell public land to pay off part of the huge debt, and all state government accounts had to be moved to the National Bank because there were literally no banks operating within the state.
Not much left going on there, so I would say it was used quite a bit.
He did also start granting land to townships for public schools, and his $1.25 million education improvements actually became the largest part of the Hendrix administration budget. Also, Indiana University was chartered during his time, and Hendrix was a personal benefactor of Hanover College. He also created the Indiana Code in 1824, and this was off the basis that a Seneca family was murdered by white men in Pendleton, as there were still high tensions between the natives and white settlers in northern Indiana. So to enforce justice, he ordered the white men tried and hanged for their crimes against Native Americans. One of his final acts was to approve the move of the capital from Corydon to Indianapolis. He resigned as governor in 1825 to become U.S. Senator, then returned to private life in Madison in 1839. In 1841, Judge William Porter purchased the home and moved his practice into the little white office next door. This building was built in 1819 by Henry P. Coburn. He was the clerk of the state Supreme Court, but Coburn moved with the court to Indianapolis in 1825. Porter was a probate judge and had a private practice. He also at times was a member of the House of Representatives, was even the Speaker of the House for a little while, and he was also a state senator. In this building, he personally studied and trained over a dozen men to become lawyers.
So if you get it open, see the little bottle, you can take the cork off, put ink in that, put the cork back on, slide your quills down the side, and then slide it together. And as you can see, why it would take so long to make a book. That's why books were such a prize.
So this building's a pretty cool way to see what a law office was like back then. Nearby is the Constitution elm. However, it's dead. The tree died of Dutch elm disease in 1925, but the city recognized its historical value, so its pieces were preserved. Much of it was turned into souvenirs, and in 1936 this sandstone monument was built to enshrine the trunk. Even though the tree isn't alive, it's still amazing to stand on the ground where the 43 delegates debated, wrote, and signed the first Indiana Constitution, right under the shade this tree used to provide. So that was the Corydon Capitol State Historic Site. A really neat place. They've done a great job restoring the Capitol and the governor's headquarters. So really great place to stop by and learn about Hoosier history. If you like this video, I've been to a bunch of other historic sites across the country, and also museums, roadside attractions, and national parks, and more. So please go check those videos out, and thanks for watching.